Hi there, this is Sarah, and this is an overview of gender and religion. So we're looking at this topic from the perspective of gender and religiosity and why certain groups may be more religious than others. And as a bit of a spoiler, it's women that are more religious than men. You'll see there's a theme here. If you're wondering who that is on the screen, that is Jesus and the sisters. They are absolutely excellent purveyors of fantastic cabaret. So I thought it would be really nice and uplifting if they joined us on this journey today. So let's get started. You will want to have your notes that you have already prepared from the Flip Learning page on the website in front of you so that you've got your kind of basis for this topic area. You also will want to have, let's put myself up there, you also will want to have your Jesus in Disneyland booklet, the post-modernity booklet that also covers gender and religion. And that booklet can also be found on the website if you don't have a paper copy in front of you. And also in the Trobe textbook in book 2, pages 52 and 53 can be really helpful here because they've got an overview of the information as well. So let's move on. Okay, I'd like you to stop for a moment here, pause the video, grab a pen, or if you're doing this through Nearpod, it will be typing it onto the slide. List as many reasons as you can think of that might explain why women appear from the data to be more religious than men. Okay, so how many reasons did you put down? Did you look some up? Did you have a look in your book? Or did you simply see how many you could think of? So you will have your reasons in front of you. Let's have a look at some of the reasons. Oh, I don't want to be blocking Jesus here. Let me move me out of the way. There we go. So one of the arguments that sociologists give us is that women are actually less risk averse. So they're less likely to take the risk of not being religious. Whereas men arguably are more kind of risk taking in their nature. Women live longer, second reason. If women live longer, it means that they're more likely to be seeing other people dying around them. They're more likely to be, reaching those later stages of their life where there are more of those, maybe those existential questions. And then religion may come in and play a part and fulfill a function for women then. Women are also more likely to care for sick and dying loved ones. Now, that's partly because of the kind of female expressive role that we have in society, but also possibly because women live longer and they're around. So because they're more likely to do that, they have that kind of those existential experiences, and that can lead for them to kind of ponder or look for spiritual religious guidance. Women are also more likely to have more time on their hands. Now, this is known as structural location. So women are more likely, because of the way society is structured, to do the expressive role and to have time in the day or time on the weekends where they can actually pursue religious attendance and religious involvement. Now, we've got to be quite careful with that point because that possibly is lacking in temporal validity because that may be outdated now. There are plenty of women who don't have an expressive home-based role anymore. So that might be a slightly old-fashioned argument, but we still want to bring it in because we can unpick it and evaluate it as well. Women also are traditionally in charge of the socialisation of children. And therefore, they may look to places like the church, like different religions, to be able to take the children and go along to activities, summer fairs, Sunday school, anything they can bring in to kind of curate and create that socialisation experience for their children. And it may also be about the values that they want to expose their children to. There's also an argument that women who are at home doing that expressive role, those kind of housewife women, who are alienated at home, as we know from a lot of, if we look back to Anne Oakley and some of the research, women feel quite alienated in that position. Therefore, they may be looking for a community to feel part of. So yes, women may be alienated in the home, looking for community and ways they can get involved, coffee mornings, that kind of thing. There's also an argument that there is a differential socialization of the way that women are raised to be in their kind of personality and their characteristics, and the way that men are raised differently. So women are socialized arguably to conform, to be more obedient, to be passive and accepting. And because of that, it may mean that women are more vulnerable to, or more accepting of, those messages that religion gives, and the kind of instructions, the orders, the expectations. And therefore, this differential socialization may mean that women are more likely to conform to the messages and the expectations of the religious group. There's also an argument that women are oppressed and they are treated as inferior in society, second-class citizens, less opportunity, and that there is therefore a status frustration. So if we see women as a marginalised group with this kind of frustration at their status as second-class citizens in society, then we're thinking about the reasons that we talk about marginalised groups joining religious groups, and it may be a kind of theodicy of disprivilege there. So if we're thinking about marginalisation, now that really gets us into a debate of, are women oppressed or not? Is religion going to offer something for women? There's a huge debate there when we think about whether religion may be patriarchal and whether it really does offer something. But there are those compensatory ideas, aren't there, that if you're marginalised and you're going to be rewarded later, so religion might explain why to kind of put up with life as it is for women who feel marginalised. There's also an argument that women are more connected with the private sphere. So if we think about this public and private sphere, this idea of public being the workplace, politics, that kind of thing, but the private sphere being home, family, personal life. And if women are more connected with the home, family, personal life, then this links to the structural location idea. If women are more connected with the private sphere, then it may be that they feel a connection then more with religion, or looking for this kind of more superstitious, really, idea of belief. Whereas we can argue that because men are more connected with the public sphere, the workplace, and politics and that kind of thing, that there's more scientific, rational thought in the public sphere. And in the private sphere, there's still a look for, there's still a search for this kind of spiritual thirst and these more superstitious explanations for our existential questions. Now, we've also got the fact that working class women may be marginalised, and therefore the compensatory promises appeal to them. So that's a social class argument, but it does fit in with the marginalisation and the status frustration side of it. But it's slightly different because we're looking at an intersection of class and gender together. Now, there's also the fact that religion is argued by Steve Bruce to attract feminine characteristics. So this fits in with the socialization idea, the socializing children, women, females to be more submissive and more accepting and more passive. And so Bruce is kind of saying, well, then, women, they've got this kind of characteristic. They're going to want these, they're going to fit in better with the beliefs of religion, and it's going to appeal to them more, and they're just going to kind of slot in there, and it becomes very natural to them. So that's Steve Bruce's argument. There's also Linda Woodhead says churches have actually become more feminized, and that there are more women in them, therefore women are going to gravitate towards them to find those kind of circles of support of women. So Woodhead is saying, churches are becoming places that are run by women for women, although we can argue about where the senior people are running the churches, whether they're men or women. And then we've got another argument, especially with New Age movements, that women are attracted to healing and channeling and these kind of very empathetic spiritual pathways. And if women are more attracted to those, then women may be more attracted to New Age movements, and then that could be considered part of women having a higher religiosity. And then finally, there's status frustration at the bottom there, but that's already been mentioned, so I will skip past that one there. Okay, so if we are going to write in our essay about gender and religiosity, or social groups and religiosity, where we'd want to bring gender in, if we're going to claim that women are more religious, we need some evidence for that, because we can't just kind of make this claim out of nowhere without backing it up. So we need to show that we understand that the data and research studies do show that women have a higher religiosity than men. And we will go on in this video to look at some of the figures as well. So we've got Brearley, 2005, a study that states women are more religious than men. We've got a finding there. Women are more likely to identify as religious, and this is a British Social Attitude Survey from 2012. So that's helpful as well. And we can also pick that apart, how, whether identifying as religious is the same as being actively a part of the membership. Also, in all major religions, apart from Sikhism, which is a really interesting anomaly, but gives you another evaluation, however, this doesn't apply to everyone. In all major religions except Sikhism, women are more likely to practice religion. That's Ferguson and Hussey, and that was from 2010. So these are all quite recent, all within the last 10 years, recent studies. Also, Miller and Hoffman, and this is quite a well-known one, Miller and Hoffman studied in 1995 that women show a greater interest and a stronger commitment to their religion. And something else that Miller and Hoffman point out is this idea of women being more willing to take risks, as with the previous slide where we looked at that list of explanations. So women more willing to take risks is something that Miller and Hoffman have found out from their studies. It's not just a kind of general observation. Okay, so we have got all of those reasons. If you want to pause, this could be a good moment to pause and make some notes. You don't have to memorize every single one of these reasons. You may decide to just pick out 2 or 3 of those, 1 or 2 of those, to have in your notes that you will then embed to memory and use in your exams. So take a moment to pause on this slide and have a look. Okay, so here is some of the data. So here we've got 1979 all the way through to 2005. So we've got these kind of spotlights on particular points in time. And what we are told here is that the attendance, so actual attendance to church, religious attendance, not identification of being religious, has really stayed roughly the same for men. So we've got 45%, 42, 43. If we looked at that as a general trend, it wouldn't really show anything other than staying quite consistent. We've then got women, very similar pattern, 55, 58, 57. There's not really anything in that, as if you smoothed it out and you took out the kind of blips, then we're not really seeing any major growth or reduction in religion, but we are seeing this difference between women and men. Now, this gives us a couple of bits of information, doesn't it? Not just the fact that women have a higher percentage than men. So please press pause here, and if you're on Nearpod, a question will pop up. Please take a moment to note down what else you think this data tells us, other than the fact that there is a higher percentage of women attending religious organisations. Okay, so really what we've got here is we've got potentially a widening gap. I mean, we haven't got enough data here to be sure, but the difference between here is 10%. The difference between here is wider. So there is possibly a widening gap between this gender division of religiosity. We also can see that, and this is a real evaluation here, the gap isn't that big. The difference is not that big. 45 to 55, it's still roughly half, isn't it? It's still roughly half men, roughly half women. There's just a slight difference. And if you compare that to other gaps that we look at in sociology, like the difference in educational achievement between pupils from the travelling community, Gypsy Roma, underachieving groups, and then you look at like Chinese and Indian students and their overachievement, we're talking about, tens and tens of percentage points between them. But here we're looking at a very, very marginal gap. So the gap does exist, and we have a lot of explanations for it, but it's not huge. So that we really need to reflect on that and show that we understand that we're not talking 80% of people in church are women. It's not that big. Okay, moving on. Now, something else we need to be able to do in these essays is we need to be able to show an understanding of the fact that women may not view religion as overly patriarchal. So we have all these arguments that religion is patriarchal. It's the scripture, it's the position of women in the church, it's the way they're portrayed, it's the rituals, it's the divisions, it's all the things women can't do, maybe that men can do within religious organisations. And that's changed over the years, but there's definite accusation of patriarchal religion. But we need to evaluate this, and we need to say, well, okay, patriarchal religion would put women off, but what if religion isn't always patriarchal? So we can't just say, because otherwise we're saying, well, women are more religious, but religion isn't very nice to women. So why on earth is this happening? Well, we're going to say sometimes religion isn't that oppressive of women. And there are examples where religion is not necessarily patriarchal. So we've just got a few evaluations here that really are just our arguments against religion being something that is not so kind to women. Firstly, let's go back to our ancient polytheistic religions. We're talking about those kind of pagan religions, pre-Christianity, pre-Islam, female goddesses, go even further back, kind of ancient Greece, Rome, Egypt. We've got these polytheistic religions where there were plenty of women and huge celebrations of women's fertility and women's abilities, and lots of goddesses. Also, female bishops. We've had female bishops since 2015, so women can now see far more of presence of women in leadership within the church. Quakers and Unitarians, within those two church groups, there's always been a more equality of gender. So actually, when we look at the inequality, we are focusing on certain religious organisations, like maybe the Catholic Church, which tends to be more conservative in that way. And then, finally, religion, as we know, because we've studied this already, can be seen as a resistance, as a force for change and a resistance against patriarchy. So almost a site of social protest. So we've got Ahmed Watson and Woodhead, and you're probably more familiar with Woodhead for this, but Ahmed Watson and Woodhead all found that the hijab, for Muslim women who choose to wear the hijab, that it actually creates this site of, feminist resistance, freedom from the male gaze, freedom from this over-sexualization, freedom from being constantly seen as, in terms of appearance, and freedom from sexual harassment. And that arguably has allowed women a lot more freedom. So, potentially you could see your religion as something that had given you plenty of freedom and not automatically see it as something that may be patriarchal. So next, we're going to just have a look at Steve Bruce. Now, excuse me, I'll move this out of the way, move myself around the screen here. So Steve Bruce, as we know, has plenty to say about religion. And one of those things is that he points out that women tend to be less goal-focused. So if women are kind of more cooperative and less domineering and kind of less competitive and more collaborative, and these are traits of femininity, these attributes fit well with religion and spirituality. That's his argument, quite simple. And then the other side of the argument, the second argument, is that Bruce agrees that secularization is occurring, and he says that we are retreating our beliefs from the public sphere into the private sphere, as we've already talked about briefly today here. And he then says, well, okay, if religion is retreating because of the move to the private sphere of religion, women are in that private sphere. Therefore, women are still going to have that sphere, that setting, that landscape where religion fits in quite well for them. And that possibly, within the private domain, can mean women getting involved with maybe cults like Scientology, New Age movements, like say, meditation and those kind of women's circles, the Red Tent, those kind of groups. And men may find that actually in the public sphere, there isn't really a space within their life, within their identity for religion, because they have far more of a focus on rational, scientific kind of rational thought within that sphere. So it does vary. So there's a little bit more here on Steve Bruce, which really builds on the notes you've already made today. And this might be worth pausing on if you want to. You could press pause now. Or you may find that you've already got enough of this in your notes. So essentially, what Bruce is saying is that working class women, so he's saying there's this divide in terms of class amongst the group, the social group that is women, and that working class women tend to support these religions that they believe have an all-powerful God, these kind of really traditional religious organizations, because these women are more passive generally in their lives. They may have a kind of job, working class jobs where you're probably told what to do a lot, and they tend to be more passive, and that then fits with carrying on those religious beliefs. But what Steve Bruce also points out is that middle class women have actually got more experience of having control over their lives. So a lot of middle class women will be career women, will be possibly the head of the household, or at least equally involved in this kind of symmetrical couples heading up a household. And therefore, in this kind of neo-conventional family, for middle class women will be more attracted to things like new age movements, and these new age groups where actually these women as individuals can develop their own version of spirituality. So what Steve Bruce is saying is that working class women are more likely to be sort of sticking with the traditional religious organizations, whereas middle class women are more likely to look towards a more kind of postmodern, pick and mix, individualistic version of a spiritual path. And then we've got a couple of theories to really shine a spotlight on, because they are very helpful in just giving us a little bit more that we can write about. So you could have a whole paragraph on this, looking at Linda Woodhead and what she has said about women and religion. So she feels that women have really changed how they interact with religion because women's position in society has changed and their roles at home has changed. So she's talked about the home-centered woman and the work-centered woman, and you can see that there's a real parallel with this in terms of what we just talked about with Steve Bruce. So what Linda Woodhead is saying is that the home-centered woman is more likely to engage with traditional religion. She's in the private sphere. She's at home looking for that connect, all of those reasons that we've looked at so far. And then the work-centered woman, the woman who is more likely to be going out to work, who is the career woman, is more likely to be secular. So she's less likely to feel a need for religion in her life. But then what Linda Woodhead brings in, which is a lot more contemporary and a gap that we kind of had with what Steve Bruce was saying just now, is this notion of women who she calls jugglers. And jugglers are the women who balance their work life and their family life. And so these are the career women who are also doing, a fair bit of the kind of management of the home as well. And actually those women who are kind of juggling everything and they've got loads going on, they're seeking some kind of spiritual experience or guidance in order to navigate that lifestyle that they've got. So she's saying, are more likely to be involved in new age movements. So what she's saying overall is women doing the expressive role at home, traditional religion. Women who are focused on work, no religion. Women who are juggling, spiritual path. So hopefully that makes sense. This may be a point just to press pause on the video right here if you want to make some notes on those three types of women, because you could get a really nice paragraph out of this explaining how it's not just about gender, women are more religious, men are less religious, but actually it can be about the different types of women and the types of lifestyle and position in society that they have. And we've also got Orn et al. From 2004, so reasonably recent, who also gives us another. So this group of sociologists presenting this study give us another explanation of women's participation in religion, and they focus on women's declining participation in religion, and they say that's down to three things: the rise of feminism, therefore women questioning their role in society; the changing role of women taking on more paid work and having less time available for religion; and then finally changing family relationships, diversity of family structure, which wouldn't be approved of by traditional religions, so then women stepping away from traditional religion because they may be in a different kind of non-conventional family structure. So this is a very good part to pause and take some notes. So what we have here is a bit more information to build on what Orn has told us, or Orn and the group of sociologists together have told us about women declining in terms of their religious belief and membership. So what I would like you to do here is press pause, and this is an extract about feminist spirituality. So this just gives us an extra layer, really. And pause here and just have a read of what this says and see if you can pick out anything that you think is quite interesting in terms of giving us explanations of women's religiosity in the current day. Okay, so hopefully you picked some things out from this extract. So this is literally just the abstract, the beginning, the sort of overview description of a longer academic journal article. So Kristen, this is just Kristen Orn. This isn't Orn et al. Actually, this is just Kristen Orn on her own. And what she's interested in finding out in this study, and if you look on Google Scholar, if you want to read the full-length study, you want to have a look at it, then do. It would be really, really good, valuable sociological reading for you. She's asking about spirituality in feminists' lives. So one of her reasons she's cited for women stepping away from religion is because of the rise of feminism, and therefore women start to question their position in religion, and then religion just doesn't fit for them anymore because they're not used to seeing themselves marginalized. It doesn't make sense. So they kind of reject the traditional religion as feminists. But she's saying that there is still spirituality for feminists, but she kind of wants to explore what this is. So what we can see in the middle of this article is the idea of women being de-churched. So feminists being de-churched and warranting a new approach. So she's talking about a new approach to feminist relationship with religion. And she says there are very complex ways that feminists create this, what she calls religio-spiritual lives. So there's this idea of like religion and spirituality, but obviously not the traditional religion that they've stepped away from because of being, feminist and because of the rise of feminism in society. So this is about this quite complex version of understanding spirituality of women. And she is saying it is quite a distinct spirituality. And she mentions lived religion, and lived religion obviously really links in with postmodernity and the idea of your individual truths and the what you experience, and therefore your religion being based on personal experience. And she's talking about feminist spirituality as a lived religion. So this in some ways contradicts what we saw before about women becoming less religious because of the rise of feminism. So this is saying there is still a version of religion, but we're looking at something a lot more postmodern and a lot more to do with a different understanding, a different spirituality that is de-churched and is not linked with those traditional religious organisations. So feel free to pause again if you want to have another read of that to make more sense of it. And finally, this is leading us on to a time where we want to start to put all of this gender and religion information into one place so we can really see what we've got and revise from it. So this is one of the fantastic knowledge organisers from The Hectic Teacher. These are just, she has them available on her website. They're just fantastic. They really are. Why recreate this when it's been done so incredibly well? So thank you to Hectic Teacher. And here you've got a space where you can lay out all the ways that religion is patriarchal, the evaluation of religion being patriarchal, so the flip side of that argument, reasons for women being more religious, gender and religiosity, the facts, that would be the evidence that women are more religious, the data. And then there's a space for Linda Woodhead and for Kristen Orn as well. So you can really summarise everything here. So what I would suggest is really reducing your notes and trying to bullet point in this knowledge organiser in the most minimal form possible. And I have got a 25-minute timer set up here, which obviously I'm not going to run now, but that would be my kind of suggested time for you to spend putting this together from your notes. And it may be that you do this from your notes once, and then the next time you do a fresh version and you try and do it from memory. And of course, if you don't have a printer handy to print one of these out, you can simply recreate this on paper using those headings. Or another option is you could download this PDF from the Hectic Teacher website, and you could upload it in something like Kami or Microsoft OneNote, which will let you write on the PDF document so you can actually annotate it. But the easiest thing probably to do is to create your own knowledge organizer just by using the headings and the layout that is suggested here. So yeah, spend 25 minutes to half an hour on that, and then the next stage will be memory recall. How much can you remember of this, and how much can you retrieve without having to look it up? And then it's a case of identifying knowledge gaps, building on those, revisiting those, requesting some reteaching if it's needed, and then continuing to build that really solid memory bank. And then, of course, comes the writing practice, using and embedding all of these concepts into writing paragraphs so that you're ready to approach a 10 or 20 marker in the beliefs assessment, whatever that may look like, in order to hit those top mark bands and use everything that you've learned here. So well done.